Hello. Occasionally when I'm trying to square my vise or align a lathe compound or my mill head, occasionally when I sweep it with the dial indicator, things go a little bit haywire. They don't go as planned. And I was trying to figure out why, so I actually sat down and thought about it for a little bit the other night. And then what I said to myself is, let me try this at bigger angles so I can see what's going on. Because normally you're doing stuff in a couple thousandths or real small angles, trying to get that last thousandths off, and you really can't see what's going on. And as soon as I did that and set the mill vise over at 5 degrees and tried playing with it, it became obvious what the problem was. And the problem is that you always want to sweep away from the pivot, no matter what you're trying to indicate and align. You always want to sweep away from the pivot. I've seen a lot of the videos on how to align mill vices and other stuff, and for some reason this isn't really driven home or even mentioned in a lot of those videos. So I just figured I'd do a separate video on just trying to drive this one point home, because it took a while for this light bulb to go on, trying to figure out, okay, why is this doing that? And I had to sit down and spend time thinking about it. Okay, I have some animations I made here, try to keep it simple instead of sitting with my vise with a hammer. So I have a Curt Vice here, made by Curt on a mill table. And what I'm going to do is lock it down on the right hand side so it pivots around that side. That seems to be the side most people like to lock it down on, and that's what I've been doing. And the proper way to sweep this would be away from that pivot. So you want to sweep from the right to the left. So let's put a dial indicator on there on the fixed jaw, zero it, and let's sweep across. And if you do this properly and sweep away from the vise, if you take a little hammer and just tap your mill vise over gently to zero that dial indicator, it should get you closer, and sometimes if you're lucky, it will get you spot on so that your vise would be aligned. And it seems like that's the way it goes. If you do it properly, it does it right away. And if not, that's when things go haywire and they go really bad all at once. Okay, now let's tilt that vise over again, 5 degrees, and it's still pivoting on the right hand side. And let's try to sweep incorrectly towards the pivot, see what happens. Okay, so I have that zeroed, and if I sweep towards the pivot, the needle will move. And the only way I can get that needle to zero again is to actually drive it away from the orientation that I want. Actually, it would make it worse. That's what's happening when you're doing it the wrong way, but you can't see this angle because it's small. So, but this is in effect what's going on if you sweep towards the pivot. So you don't want to do that. Same thing with a mill head, or you could see this as a compound on your lathe. The pivot is in the mill head or in the compound, and what you want to do is zero the needle and then sweep away from the pivot, and then take the little hammer and align it, and that will always get you closer. And like I said, sometimes you luck out and you get it right there, especially when you're animating it. Okay, let's change this block here to a different angle block, and let's try to sweep towards the pivot and see what happens. So that dial indicator is zeroed. If you retract it, it's going to change because it's getting further away from that point up in the corner here. So let's tap it to make that needle zero. And you can see it's actually driving it away from the direction we want it to be. So if you sweep towards the pivot, it's actually opposite of what you want. Now the third one is a vise on a swivel, because I do put my vise on a swivel sometimes. And I have tried to sweep all the way across, and sometimes people say, oh, just average it out and things like that. And that isn't even that great, because you don't know how much weight you on either side of the pivot. So what I'm doing now is I will take the dial indicator and I will move it so I know I am, say, to the left of the pivot point. I'll zero it, then I'll sweep out, and then I'll take my little hammer and align it, and that will get you really close, or in an animation it will make it perfect. Okay, now let's cock it over another 5 degrees, say to the clockwise, and let's try to sweep it in properly all the way across like I was doing. So there it is zeroed. I'm going to go all the way across. I got a big deflection, and if I were going to try to zero that, the only thing I would do is knock it over in the other, basically an angle off the other direction. So that doesn't work. The other thing is say if I set it up improperly now to sweep towards the pivot on the right hand side, I have the needle zeroed, and I sweep it to the center. Now this is kind of interesting. You get two solutions for this. I can either knock it counterclockwise and orient it in this direction to center the needle, or I can knock it clockwise and orient it in that direction to center the needle. Neither one will put it in line with what you want it in line with. So whenever you're indicating anything, the bottom line is always sweep away from the pivot. If you do that, things won't go haywire. I know they were going haywire for me sometimes, and it's one of these things that you're doing at such small angles that you really can't see what's going on. If you want to prove it to yourself, put your mill vise on the table, set it over 5 degrees and do it. Sweep away, and it'll center the first time. You could do that bit where you move the indicator and just tap it in. If you sweep towards the pivot, as you tap that needle back to zero, you're going to get it further and further and further away from where you want it to be. Okay, well, I hope this video helps people who are just learning. And whenever you're sweeping anything and trying to align it, just remember, always sweep away from the pivot. Well, thank you. Thanks for watching.